hello, everyone. I'm not sure if our audio's good or not because I pirated our equipment.
What do you mean pirated our equipment? It's the same equipment we've had for ages.
No, I mean like I stole it and used it for another purpose and then came back and all the settings are different. So
you were the pirate.
I was the pirate. Haven't we already established that I'm the biggest problem around here? How do I still have a job?
Because you're wonderful.
Oh, wow. All right. How's it going, man?
Good. Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone to the Red Couch Theology podcast. This is where we sometimes talk about theology, but sometimes talk about nonsense.
Yeah.
Someone asked me today if we could put a time marker in the YouTube session of when we start talking about actual stuff.
That's amazing. Split it to nonsense versus real stuff.
And I'm like, that's assuming we don't flip-flop back and forth often.
Sure. And that depends. Like right now, are we talking about real stuff? Because we're talking about like the flow of the show, which is quite important. Or are we talking nonsense? I don't know.
Well, it depends on whether you think that most podcasts talk about how they should produce the podcast while also live on the podcast.
Actually, no, it's even worse than that. Whether most podcasts would talk about how badly they've produced the podcast live.
So, all right. At this marker, whatever this time marker is, we're going to talk about serious stuff now.
Let's go.
So here's the serious stuff. You taught about prayer and anchoring sort of your life to prayer, but you took it in an interesting angle in the sense that you went for the jugular. Like you said the thing that everyone secretly feels about prayer, and you said it out loud.
Well, not everybody, but
most people have encountered a moment where they're like, I'll tell a story. So when I was a kid, I was probably 8 or 9. We encountered that passage, like if you ask with fervency or whatever, like God says yes or something. I don't know, which there's a couple different iterations of something of that nature. Ask with faith. So I decided I was going to pray for a dirt bike. And I prayed and I tried to muster as much faith as I could possibly muster. And I did not get a dirt bike.
Oh, that's so painful.
And so, yeah.
I'm sorry, man.
So tell me, yeah, it was like, I mean, it's really one of the biggest sufferings I've ever been through, if you think about it.
Well, this the like, so this is, and this is why sometimes we talk about trying to turn Jesus into Santa Claus. Have you ever seen the movie, The Santa Claus?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the kind of crux of that, of the guy who's like, I guess he's not the bad guy. It's Judge Reinhold. He plays the stepdad. And he's always telling the kid, no, Santa's not real, all those things. But it turns out like the crux of his problem is he asked for a penny whistle and he didn't get a penny whistle.
Yeah.
So like in those moments, your faith is questioned. And so and I'm going to hold if the premise of prayer is that God is like a better Santa Claus, which I think as a kid, especially, but perhaps even into adulthood, when you read lines like that, is the inference is yes. Then it is traumatic to your faith when you don't see the results of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was your story. That was your encounter. Man, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Did you ever get a dirt bike ever?
I got a mini bike later in life that I bought with my own allowance.
That's amazing.
And it was a piece of junk, but it worked.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, talk a little bit about like why. I mean, you built it up. You talked about like this tremendous, tremendous missionary or philanthropist. I guess not.
Yeah, George Mueller.
So, a guy who takes care of kids and orphans and stuff, and
thousands of them.
Tons of faith.
Yep.
Amazing. Like
never asked
prayerful.
For a single financial gift in his life.
Yeah, so you give that example, and then you give the antithesis of that, where a guy just basically says, never had an answered prayer ever under any circumstance.
60 years following Jesus, no personal prayers answered, no spouse's prayers answered, no kids' prayers answered, no personal property prayers answered, and goes through the list. And it's like, what a waste of time. Don't
Yeah.
recommend it.
To which I say the answer was no.
Yes. Yeah,
So
potentially.
that's the funny thing about this terminology. We always talk about like, oh, answered prayer, but what we mean and what this guy meant was God said yes.
Yes.
But that's a little bit of some semantics. But
what I think is interesting there is we have very clear markers for us if we ask something like that and God says yes. The thing happens.
Yeah.
The answer that looks like no is the thing doesn't happen, which also feels the same as if someone just didn't hear you at all.
Yes.
If I say,
say,
hey, Aaron, like, are we doing the podcast this week at the same time? And you don't answer. I'm like, did he not hear me? Like, was he doing something else?
It's like worse than a no.
Yes.
Almost.
But
It's silence.
But
it feels like relationally silent. Yeah.
So I think you can understand. Like I've watched a bunch of, the term theology bros.
Yeah.
Like the guys online that are like tearing him up. They're like, this guy's an idiot. And there's all these people in the comments that are like, that's not what you follow Jesus for. That's not what you follow Jesus for. All these different things. And like, there's some theological truth to their answers.
Yes.
But I do think like maybe he actually deserves or needs compassion first. In some sense of, man, I'm sorry that that's been your story and that's the expectations you were given and that like actually like maybe this guy's never been discipled in that journey. I don't know. We don't know his story. We just know that somewhere he had expectations that weren't met. And so I actually feel like sympathy for him, I guess. And
Absolutely.
when I nudge it into my own life, I'm like, yeah, I kind of get that sense of like, I remember the first time like I prayed deeply for something was when my uncle got sick. I've talked about him before, like really important person in my life, larger than life character and diminished by this cancer that really just rocked him. I remember standing behind the shed one day at school just in tears, like, God, please don't let him die.
Yeah.
And my mom tells a story about them all gathered around him towards the end of his life and praying, and they felt like something was about to happen. They were like, all of them were like, he's going to be healed.
Yeah.
And he wasn't. So you read stories around like what Jesus says about healing and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, why not him? And why not the answer that we wanted?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, yeah, how did you deal with that in the message for those who didn't get a chance to hear it?
Yeah. So what I took in the message was this idea that actually when we talk about prayer being answered, especially in the context of our passage for this week, which you assigned me actually.
Yeah.
And you actually, I don't know if you did this on purpose, you only assigned the very like minute middle part of the passage.
Yeah.
Actually on the list, it was just 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Which is just like, do not be anxious about anything, but in all of, trying to think of the phrase
prayer and
now.
supplication.
Yeah.
But
through prayer and supplication, make your requests be known to God.
Yeah.
There's a lot of context around that, which you obviously knew and left me to figure out what to include. And so when you take just that couple of verses, you're left with a little bit ambiguity and a fair conclusion might be, the prayer should be answered. I'm anxious about this, God. I'm going to ask you, you're all powerful. You can do all these things. You care about me. Believe all of these pieces of the, of the theology I've been taught. And now I'm going to ask and you're going to do something. But when you read the context around it, the passage starts to look a little bit different. There's what I personally feel is not maybe a horrible translation in Greek, but at least a questionable translation. So for those of you that aren't aware of how Greek works in the original manuscripts we have, and this is always an interesting detail. Greek in the original manuscripts has no lowercase. It's all uppercase. It has very little punctuation. It just flows together. So there's a lot of choices being made by the people translate it as to what exactly they're going to translate it to. And now the later Greek texts that have been written, they all have lowercase, they all have all the punctuation you might expect. But again, some choices made on the original manuscripts, maybe for the best, maybe not.
Yeah. We don't want to reduce your confidence in the English translation, but if you've ever done any translation, even with the purest of heart, you're making interpretive decisions. You have to. You can't get around.
And there's all sorts of reasons for that maybe if you're only used to English as a language, are hard to understand. Like maybe the simplest one to explain is that Greek is it's called a declined language, or it uses declination. So the endings of the word change depending on the tense. Now that happens in English, but not necessarily in ways that you'd notice a lot. And so we quite often have different words for different tenses, whereas they have the same stem and then a different ending depending on the tense. But some of them match up. And so some of them are like context is key, all those different things. So like it's all like you're trying to figure out what's the context and what might this ending mean and how might I best interpret it.
Yes.
When you get to this text, I have always felt that the language there, have you got that in there in Philippians 4? Yeah.
How far down? I can't remember.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. We start in verse 4 with rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Philippians is known as the epistle of joy. It's like very upbeat, very much encouraging, that kind of mentality. Let your gentleness be evident to all. And then it says, almost like a separate sentence in the English translation, it simply says, the Lord is near. Full stop. Because of the verse break, verse 4 becomes verse 5. We tend to think, well, this is a new thought entirely. We've already had one thought, then a second thought, then a third thought. Maybe this is now a fourth thought in one sentence. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. If you just read those verses without the verses before, you might be excused for thinking that this is simply permission to ask for whatever you need in a given moment. But when you think about the end of verse 4 running into verse 5, it might sound something like this. The Lord is near, so you do not need to be anxious about anything. Suddenly a verse that's about like what might happen when you pray is more about who might be present when you pray. And that seems to be, according to a lot of writers, and maybe this text, and perhaps my experience, your experience, is actually what we're given in prayer. That maybe the thing that we're guaranteed in prayer is that God is present.
Yeah.
And the yes is not guaranteed. And when you think about that in line with praying into God's will, your will be done on heaven, in earth as it is in heaven. Like I sometimes even pray that when I'm praying that prayer. Your will be done in my life as it is in heaven. Like may your will be done. That maybe changes our feelings about how we might trust God to answer. I tend to believe that you can ask God for anything, but if you're going to trust him for his will, then some of the prayers we pray, they suddenly become prayers that maybe don't need to be answered. Like I always used to joke with people when I was going through my real, or don't need to be answered. Yes, sorry. When I was going through my real, new to following Jesus, 18, 19-year-old phase, I was sharing my faith with everyone. I was seeing things happen in church that were miraculous. I would say to my friends, I actually believe I could ask God for a Ferrari. I actually believe that right now. I was so up in the clouds, just man, God answers prayer. And I'd always just throw in, but maybe it's not his will for my life. Which actually was probably the best piece of my theology around prayer at the time. I think there's all sorts of things that you could ask God for. And actually we see that maybe in some of the name it and claim it faith.
Yeah.
But actually, if you're someone who genuinely is asking God for his will, then a lot of the things that our earthly desires would say yes to, lottery wins, huge houses, like all those things.
Yeah.
They become, no, that's not actually good for you. There's a reason Jesus says it's hard for a rich man to go through the eye, to enter into heaven. It's as hard as for a camel to enter through the eye of a needle. We tend to have a culture in the West that longs to be rich. People want to be wealthy.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we forget Jesus' recommendation to us that wealth may not be a good thing. And so if you think about those two elements just for a moment, riches that we might pray for, Jesus' warning about the possibility of riches and what it might cost us on an eternal level. When you think about praying for those in line with God's will, how often do you think he might say yes? And how often do you think he might say, that's not a good thing for you?
Yeah, and I also think one of the big struggles when it comes to prayer is that we overestimate our own capacity to know what's good for us.
Yeah.
Massively. And so the biggest help to me is just knowing how I parent my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love that they come to me with their requests. And I factor in their desire a tiny bit.
Yeah.
But my ultimate, my preeminent trumps over all things is whether the thing they're asking for is genuinely good for their thriving.
I was listening to Jimmy Carr on the Joe Rogan show. And Jimmy Carr would not claim to be a follower of Jesus on any level, but he has been someone who's expressed this huge surprise at the gift of parenting. Because he always said, like, I found the cheat code. I don't have kids. Life's easy. And then he said, like, I realized after I got to like 40, I'm playing at this really low stakes table.
Yeah.
And actually, like, the real gift is to play, like, where it matters. And he said, so children was a natural choice at that point. And he said, it's been the biggest gift ever. But he said, one of the things I constantly know is that I am making hard choices for my kids with the goal of it being better later on. Yeah. So when they say to me, I want to be on a screen all day, which is my kids' regular request as well. Just leave them with a tablet and they'll be happy. It's really easy parenting opt-out at times.
Totally.
It's like, just take a tablet, leave me alone. That it's actually rewiring part of their brain and is going to make certain things really hard for them in the future.
Yeah.
It's actually going to make it less likely that they can do something meaningful career-wise. It's actually going to leave them with all sorts of kind of like challenges in the future. So he says, I am making hard choices now for a preferred future for them. I'm like, man, like, you're starting to sound like Jesus in some ways now.
And so then, like, I think an answered prayer, a yes answer to prayer is good and beautiful, but the agenda behind a yes is oftentimes just relationship with my kids.
Yeah.
Like when my kids ask for something frivolous or even something that's semi-unhealthy for them, like, can we go get ice cream?
Mm-hmm.
Like, ice cream is not a healthy choice.
Yeah. I
will occasionally say yes because it's about the relationship and the memory created, which I decide in any given moment, depending on what's going on in our world, outweighs the health risk of sugar.
Yeah.
And so so the relationship's the driving force behind the yes, not the request.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm actually trying to meet them with a yes just so that they know that I love them, that I love spending time with them. Again, so it's like, to your thesis in your sermon, it's always about the relational dynamic for God, regardless of whether, there's times when I pray and because I like this posture of like thinking of myself as a child, because it helps me navigate some of these like frustrations around prayer. But I'll say, all right, Father, I have this idea and I'm so insufficiently capable of making this, but I have this idea and I think it sounds awesome. And I literally say this in my prayer. I think it sounds awesome. I think it sounds like your kingdom. So I'm going to pray for it. But if it's not your kingdom, then say no.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll present my idea. Mm-hmm. It's not like it's an idea he's never heard or, I never considered bringing my kingdom through that method. But what it does to me is it helps me interact with my Father and engage in some ways. And sometimes he answers those prayers with a yes, which maybe means he just was going to do that thing anyway. And he just wanted to bring me in on it. So.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I think that I was listening to, do you know who Scotty Scheffler is? Mm-mm. He's currently the best golfer in the world. He's won
shows how much I
bunch of stuff really early on. Guy's a rock star. No, got
ball golf.
Yeah, the real golf. Yeah, he's not got Tiger Woods like presence in quite the same way, but he's potentially going to be as close as we've seen to that kind of level for a long time. It's so consistent. And he actually talked the other day. Someone asked him about the major championship he won this year. And he said, the problem for me is that it's always disappointing. Like, it's so fleeting. It doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do about that. Like, so this is a guy who's like reached a pinnacle of something. Number 1 ranked golfer in the world. Regularly wins. People joke about, like, if he can putt today, he's winning the tournament. He's just so consistent. And yeah, he's like, it's actually a little bit disappointing. It's one of those pieces that demonstrate how when we think, like, oh, if only I could get that, I'd be happy. It doesn't work. We've talked about this a lot at South.
Yeah.
This materialistic world that will tell you, no, if you can only get this, you'll be happy. So a lot of our prayers, if we let ourselves go down that trend, that line is that we just keep praying for the next thing. For the next thing. My mentality got a little tweak with this just the other day. Someone said, they shared something that somebody else had told them, and they said it was really life-changing for them. They said this, they said, if I could have seen my life now as a kid, I'd have assumed we were rich. Like, if I could have watched, like, the way that we get to live now.
Yeah.
I'd have assumed these are rich people. Like, these people have, like, they have it sorted.
Yeah.
Like, they drive, like, not old cars, not brand new cars, but, like, you know.
Yeah.
Like, cars better than I had as a kid. They get to eat out fairly regularly. I never got to do that as a kid. They don't worry about paying the mortgage. I never got to not worry about that as a kid. They go on a European, I mean, by necessity in some ways because of family, but they go on a European vacation every year. Like, there's things about our life that just I would assume, like,
yeah.
And they have the family life I would have dreamt of as a kid. If I could have designed my life as a kid,
yeah, I'd
be like, these are the things I would put in place.
Yeah.
We even have a trampoline in the backyard. I would have loved that as a kid.
Yeah.
And yet, like, that doesn't change the fact that internally there'd be like some sense of like, I like that. I'd like that. I'd like that. I'd like that. Oh man, those guys, their house is beautiful. Like that, like neighborhood. That it's just interesting how there's always another thing.
So
you go down that route. So some of our prayers, if we're honest, are a continuation of that narrative. Like, it's the next thing. It's the next thing.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of the person out there who's like, that's not my prayer.
Sure.
I'm not asking for a bigger house.
Yeah.
I have excruciating, chronic pain in my back or in my whatever. I have chronic migraines.
Yeah.
And I feel like I could be a better follower of Jesus and be more engaged as a healthy human being that loves other human beings if I wasn't just constantly racked by chronic pain.
Yeah.
So I pray.
Yeah. Yeah.
For years.
Yeah.
That's where sometimes like, okay, we'll get outside of the material side. Okay, we can make a mental assent. Okay, that's right. Maybe there's a good reason why we don't get more money. But what about some of these other things that like, or even a restored relationship or a healthy marriage, or these things that seem so in alignment with God's kingdom and world of how he wants the world to function. And we pray fervently for the thing we think sounds like his kingdom, and it still seems like it doesn't come.
And I don't think there's a universal answer to that, is there? I mean, I shared that with my uncle. I felt like my uncle being around was a better narrative for this world.
Yeah.
He was one of the truly great Jesus followers I've come across. Just like he used to run these little stalls giving out free Bible stuff at like local fairs. Like how can someone turn a stall that does that into the funnest stall at the fair? Like, like you got flocks of kids around this stall giving out Bibles because that's just who he was.
Huh.
He just made things fun. So my sense was like, it's a better world with him in it. And I don't understand the no to that. And so like there's anecdotal evidence we might give that doesn't fit every situation. And I think that's you almost pause on giving it because of that. But I'm gonna say it anyway, just knowing if it doesn't apply to you, I don't get to decide that. But one, we know just based on our own lives that very rarely do people say, oh man, this year was super easy and I grew a ton in following Jesus. Like we actually think like ease helps us follow Jesus. Actually doesn't usually. I think there's a level to which God trusts some people to go through some things. And that's surprising as well. When we were parenting Jude, my third kid, when he was young and he really had some of these more autistic signs that have started to fade out a bit as he's got older. He still has some quirks, but it's changed a little bit. I would actually regularly pray, God, thank you for trusting me with this. You trusted us to be able to parent well in this situation. Like that means something.
Yeah.
As much as I'd pray, God, like, reverse this thing, change this thing. And actually finding over the years, he just became more and more of a gift.
Yeah.
Because of his quirks. So I have had moments, not long moments, of intense pain like that, and I would not wish it on anyone. And I would certainly find myself praying, God, please take this away, as I did in those moments.
Yeah.
And so how you deal with that, man, that's so hard when it's over a long period of time.
Yeah, I remember. I think I've probably shared this on the show. But probably one of the most painful seasons of my life. And I remember just crying out to God so many times, late at night in bed, just like, Lord, please lift this burden for me. And this pain, like I just want goodness and beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And I came across the Hebrews 12 passage about, in your struggle, like consider him who endured from sinners such hostility. And this freedom came from this passage that was like beautiful. One, because I was in this place at that time in my theology that I must be doing something wrong.
Yeah.
That's why I'm suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Very much like like you talked about, was it this week or was it a couple weeks ago? Maybe it was on a previous episode talking about like in that day and age, in Jesus' day and age, they assumed like if you are lame, it was your fault.
Gotta be you or your parents.
Or your parents, yeah.
We got someone to blame.
Yeah. And so I think that that's actually more common in our world today too. Like, oh, I'm suffering, it's because I'm sinning.
Yeah.
And so like, one, I was under this burden of shame and guilt because I'm suffering, it probably means I'm sinning.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to figure out where the sin was, and I found stuff always because I am a sinner. And so I'm like, yes, I'm going to try and eliminate this thing. And then my suffering is going to go away. And then it just never worked. And then I encountered this passage that talked about like Jesus suffered at the hands of sinners hostility and suffered tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So suffering doesn't equal sinning necessarily.
Yeah.
So that was one gift. And then the other gift was realizing that this passage that goes on and talks about this discipline of the Lord. And the realization that discipline can be seen as punishment. Mm-hmm. But in this context, it couldn't be punishment, at least the flow coming from Jesus.
Yeah.
It's actually like training like a coach.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started to, like, in that same season, when the pain would get extra difficult or heavy, I would picture like this image of me in the weight room, and my coach is putting more weights on, and I'm like, I don't think I can lift this. And he's like, so the pain actually was like this nod, similar to what you just said with about your prayers to the Lord related to your son. It was like, no, I think you are. And if my coach thinks I'm ready to lift this weight, even if I'm not, he's right there to spot me.
Yeah.
And he believes in me more than I believe in me. Yeah. And then the suffering started to become this weird invitation to, like, almost like pride of my father and coach in that I'm ready for more growth, ready for more maturing. Yeah. So now when the heat turns up in my life, sometimes I'm like, okay, I disagree. Don't think I'm ready for this, but you do. And so therefore I'm going to try and lean in.
Yeah.
We did get a question this week. And before I read it to you, I'm just going to confess to the whole audience that I have anxiety around public reading. Did you know this?
I did not know this.
Yes. I'm not a very good reader, so sometimes I just get all anxious and start stumbling. This is a long question, so I'm going to do my best, but you can know that that's why I get all out of sorts. Regarding the sermon, July 13th, what a beautiful blessing to hear this sermon. The Spirit of the Lord has been working on me sometime without my full cooperation to bring about some of the states that Alex spoke of. About 12 years ago, God led me to discover a type of silent prayer called centering prayer. I did not choose this route spiritually, but I know God did it for me. Alex's sermon confirms that I'm on a recognized path, and I know he has spoken about this contemplative path last year. I wasn't quite sure of my journey for a long time now, but my Red Couch Theology question for you to ponder is the role of pain, suffering, lamentation, and diminishment in the process of bringing this intimacy into one's life. For myself, I reflect back on a decade ago. My life was just perfect and the way that I wanted it, and yet God brought medical problems which have been dealing to include open heart surgery, similar to Alex's sharing in the sermon, and a complete reconstruction of my spine, which is ongoing. Strangely, in all this pain, I reflect that it draws me closer to an intimacy with my Abba.
Wow. Does
our Heavenly Father allow this pain and suffering, or actually bring it?
Such a good question.
I trust that some find a way to this divine intimacy without the route of pain and suffering, but somehow I wonder if it's essential and should be expected, not exactly seeker-friendly sermon material. Should we pray for pain? Should we want pain? If it's the path to surrender and death and false personality, here's a chance for you guys to reflect. I think it's a brilliantly crafted
a great
question. And you're like tracking with him, then he just goes for the jugular. Like, well, no, should we want pain?
So I was actually thinking about it, that perspective, when you were reading it. I think so. I actually nearly used centering prayer as an example. I've used it a few times. I do think it's probably the greatest gift in prayer. I'm going to say that, like, with some sense of, I don't know that. I find it just amazing as a gift. I think I've shared before that my word I've used in centering prayer recently has been storehouses.
Yeah.
There's a line in a song that I actually asked you to do, and I wasn't here for it. I think it was when Kevin Butcher was preaching last year. It's a line in a song by a girl called Jess Ray. And she says something like, "But you will never come to the bottom of my storehouses of love." Like, it just, to me, is this beautiful picture of like a storehouse of grain just overflowing that you can't get to a bottom of. And that's what God's love for me is like. And so for me, it's just become this word that invites me into like embrace and and presence and joy. But in around that language of like silence and contemplation, there has been a lot of writing that has said something like this. I think this was a direct Richard Rohr quote. God is experienced through two things: suffering or contemplation is one of the two. And suffering has a way, it seems, of bypassing the contemplative element. That in suffering, it seems like there's this possibility that God is just instantly present without any of the seeking the work, just as a gift. And then the other method is that you actually do the work, not earning, but putting in the effort, to use that Dallas Willard language.
Yeah.
God is not opposed to effort, or grace is not opposed to effort. It's just opposed to earning. But you actually look for him. I think of like Psalms, like, language in Jeremiah that says, I'll be found of you when you seek me with all your heart. And so I think there is a gift of presence in suffering that is different.
Yeah. And I agree. So are you recommending that we pray for suffering?
That's a great question. I think that's a courageous prayer. I think the best way I could imagine it being phrased would be something like, God, I would like to experience you, no matter what it costs. And to do so regularly might be to invite suffering in your life. And knowing that suffering might cause hardship for people around you. Hardship in a marriage or in a parenting situation or in a child as a carer, all those sorts of things. And that in some eternity in the future, you might all look at that and say that was absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
But it's not easy for anyone. So, I mean, suffering's hard for the person that's experiencing it, and it's differently hard for the people that
observe it, that
watch it. I mean, the number of parents that I've spoken to that, I've had a child who's suffering, who's been hurt. Something has happened to them in this world that's traumatic. And every parent I've talked to said, I would take it on myself every day of the week.
Yeah.
So I like you recognize the potential trauma of that for others as well. And it's a hardship.
Yeah. So John Owen, this Puritan writer, wrote this poem called I Ask the Lord. He says, I ask the Lord that I might grow in faith and love and every grace, might more of his salvation know and seek more earnestly his face. And 'twas he who taught me thus to pray, and he, I trust, has answered prayer, but it has been in such a way as almost drove me to despair. And then he goes on to describe these horrific trials that come. And then the sort of punchline at the end of this poem, and it's been turned into multiple different songs, is these, Lord, why is this I trembling cry? Will thou pursue thy worm to death? 'Tis in this way, the Lord replied, I answer prayer for grace and faith. Mm-hmm. These inward trials I employ from self and pride to set thee free, that thou might seek thy all in me. Yeah. And that's such a brutal poem especially when you're on the outside looking in to a suffering. But if you're genuine, if you've tasted and seen of God's goodness, it is so unparalleled in its beauty and goodness that it gives people the boldness to pray ludicrous prayers, like whatever it takes, Jesus, whatever it takes to get me closer to your goodness and beauty. And there's been moments where I've had that faith, and then there's been moments where I trembling cry, Lord, what will thou pursue thy worm to death? And so is it, yeah.
So I think that a starting point, if you like, man, that's just like, I'm like with the guy that's like, what's with the unanswered prayers for property? Like, I've been praying for a house or a better house for a long time.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm just disappointed with, God hasn't shown up for me in those ways.
Yeah.
Then a better starting point is probably something like, give me the faith to pray those kind of prayers, or help me get to a point where I can honestly pray those kind of prayers. To acknowledge that you're starting from a point of like, I'm just nowhere near being able to say something like that. It wasn't Teresa of Avila. Who was it that said, God, I don't love you and I don't want to love you. I don't even want to love you, but I want to love you.
Yeah.
It's an honesty of like where you are in that journey. I think sometimes we surprise ourselves there in terms of who we are and what we truly hope for. I remember I was watching a movie the other day with some of my family, and one of the guys was in danger, and the guy that was trying to help him was suspicious as to whether he should help him or not. Like, are you someone I should be bothering to help? And he said to him, "So are you a good man?" And the guy paused and he went like, "Yeah, I don't know." And the guy helps him. And, as he comes back to health, he's like, "Why did you help me?" And he said, "Well, I asked you if you were a good man." And he said, "And you paused and said you weren't sure." Well, if you were a bad man, you would never have asked that question. You would never have paused like that. Like, if you were someone that had no desire to be good, you would have just lied to me. You just said, "Yeah, sure." So it was just one of those interesting, like behind the scenes looks, even in the pop culture, of the movie world, as to like how complicated we are and who we actually desire to be and actually what we want from God. And I think most of us would like God's will for our lives, but if we're honest, we're just a little afraid of what God's will might look like.
Yes. Yeah. And I think this is where like returning to the love of God becomes like this safety net when it comes to that fear. Like saying, I don't know if I want your will. The only way you can like actually grow in faith to know, no, I absolutely want his will. I want his kingdom to come and his will to be done on earth as it is in heaven, whatever it takes. The only way anyone gets the boldness to pray that is if you're really confident in his goodness and in his love, which is kind of a little spoiler alert. Some of the element of like what it means to anchor to the cross, or anchor to the gospel is just this like shouting declaration in human history that this is how far God will go to demonstrate love. So the second part of that question I want to linger with for just a moment. Okay, so we've established that God can use and does often use suffering to bring about intimacy. Does he cause suffering?
I think there's language in scripture that would point to that he doesn't, that he uses it. I think there's language that suggests that God doesn't cause evil, but allows things to happen. That's some of the language around like what sometimes gets called a cruciocentric theology. That if God, and I'm giving some pointers to this Sunday a little bit, but if God ultimately reveals himself with Jesus, who dies for those that are enemies, then actually what we see in the Old Testament is God removing his protection, that he's allowing things to happen as part of the journey of faith of his people. But ultimately, the key to the revelation is always the Jesus story and the cross, and God choosing his own evil or choosing his own suffering, pain for his followers. So I'd find it hard to say yes to that. But when you think about the Job story, like that's maybe the best example I could come up with of God saying, I'm stepping back and allowing.
Yes. No, I mean, I feel like there's passages that the author of those passages definitely thinks it was God who's doing it.
Yeah.
Even when outsider uses that language.
Yeah,
and so I think, at least from my perspective, and maybe you push back on this, but I think the answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. But I think more often than not, the things that happen in the world, both good and evil, are a little bit more the results of the system structures that God designed into how the world should and shouldn't function. And we either align with design or don't align with design. When we don't align with design, bad things happen. When we do align with design, better things tend to happen. But those are principles. But then, like other times, like God seems to step into that system and actively act for good or suffering in certain moments, like to a prayer of someone saying like, Lord, I want to grow, whatever it takes. And is he actively causing that pain? Well, maybe not. Maybe he doesn't need to.
Well, this is the problem with this question, and getting
so
a
difficult.
solid answer is what do we mean by causes? So let me tell a brief story that I think I can tell without it becoming super emotional. I've told it before in some level somewhere, but when I was at the lake up in Minnesota a couple of years ago, I was doing some stuff on one of the boats. And I'd kind of had this awareness that Jude had come down to the lake.
Yeah.
But was busy. He was kind of just like, okay, kind of semi-aware. And then I heard this faint noise. And I was, again, in the middle of doing something on the boat. And I thought, I'm just going to go check what that is. And I walked to the front of the boat, and Jude's in the water, face down, just like desperately splashing away, trying to come back to the surface. And I reached out and grabbed him and pulled him in. And I was fortunate. Then I got there like maybe 30 seconds after he fell in, 20 seconds. So he was okay. If he'd have died, I would have blamed myself for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I would have had this sense that I did that through being negligent, through not stopping it happen.
Yeah.
So on some level, I would have held myself as the cause of those events. And other people would have said, no, you didn't cause it. You didn't do it. It was an accident. Accidents happen. But I would have held my responsibility as his protector, the one who's supposed to watch over him, as having not done that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not, if you've been in a situation like that, I'm not saying you're to blame or any of those things. I'm just talking about how I would have felt in that moment.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about, does God cause it? Well, he's either cause if he doesn't stop it. That's the wrestling of theodicy. He's all powerful. He's all knowing. He's all good.
Yeah.
Like he should stop those things happening. And if he doesn't, on some level, to some people's minds, he's the cause of it.
Yeah. And if he built the system in the first place, that drowning can exist.
Yeah. So I think that there's a nuance to that word that makes it very hard to come to a conclusion for me. If God does good things for some people, certainly across history, you look at the ways that the people of Israel believe God protected them, defeated their enemies, or there's some image bearer of God somewhere who now is suffering because of that protection. One man's suffering is another man's good, and vice versa at times.
Yeah.
If you're a business owner that prays for more clients, for growth, and then someone else goes out of business because of it, has God caused your good? Has he caused their suffering? All sorts of just like
it's way too complicated.
That circle around us, and we ultimately end up kind of maybe wallowing like Judas, trying to figure out like, what is this story here? And so that's why I like the conclusion that I kind of came to, which is whatever your story looks like. God is present in your story. And that idea came from, I sometimes feel like I quote Frederick Buechner too much. But he
never.
The reason I quote him so much is because he's just brilliant.
He has a way of saying stuff.
He does, yeah. And he has a thing on prayer that I think just like gets to the heart of this. I don't know if I've got time to. Yeah, here we go. We all pray, whether we think we're praying or not. The odd silence we fall into when something beautiful is happening, or something very good or very bad. That sometimes floats up out of us, out of the 4th of July crowd when the rocket bursts over the water. The stammer of pain at someone else's pain. Stammer of joy at someone else's joy. Whatever words or sounds we use for sighing with over our own lives. These are all prayers in a way. They are all spoken not just to ourselves, but to something even more familiar than ourselves and even more strange than the world. According to Jesus, by far the most important thing about praying is to keep at it. The image he uses to explain this are all rather comic, as though he thought it was rather comic to have to explain it at all. He says God is like a friend you have to borrow bread from at night. The friend tells you in effect to drop dead, but you go on knocking anyway until finally he gives you what you want so he can go back to bed again. Or like a crooked judge who refuses to hear the case of a certain poor widow, presumably because he knows there's nothing much in it for him. But she keeps hounding him until he finally hears her case just to get her out of his hair. Even a stinker, Jesus says, won't give his own child a black eye when the child asks for peanut butter and jelly. So how all the more will God when his children ask? Be importunate, God says, not one assumes just because you have to beat a path to God's door before God will open it. Because until you beat the path, maybe there's no way of getting to your door. Ravish my heart, John Donne wrote. And then he's got this bit where he says, believe somebody is listening. Believe in miracles. That's what Jesus told the father, who asked him to heal his epileptic son. All things are possible to him who believes. And the father spoke for all of us when he answered, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. What about when the boy is not healed? When listened to or not, the prayer goes unanswered. Who knows? Just keep praying, Jesus says. Remember the sleepy friend, the crooked judge. Even if the boy dies, keep on beating the path to God's door, because that's the one thing you can be sure of, is that down the path you beat, even with your most half-cocked and halting prayers, the God you call upon will finally come.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah. Who writes like that?
Yeah, and I think back to your point a little bit ago, the story you just told, maybe one thing that is true about God is, regardless of whether you would have caused the death of a son, the feeling that you did might be true of how God feels about all our suffering as well.
Yeah.
But he knows the complexity of the world, and he's got reasons far beyond what we can handle and understand of why he would say yes or no or not stop a suffering. But I think there's pretty strong biblical evidence that he feels the pain as if he caused it.
And I think with the story of Jesus, he both does say it and can say of the world at its most broken and our experience of that. He can say, yes, me too.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the gift, like, of the cross, ultimately, that God says, no, I've felt that, the world at its worst.
The worst possible expression of pain. I am right there with you, and it's not fair.
And having all the power in the world to stop it and choosing not to for the good of the world. I mean, that's the profound thing.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Aaron.
Good stuff. I'm going to find the stop button. Thank you all for tuning in. And let's keep praying. Find that Frederick Buechner quote if you need to. What book is that in?
Yeah, it's in Wishful Thinking. And it's just cool. It's just, published in Wishful Thinking, which is a brilliant book where he has like little ideas around the alphabet of grace, he calls it. So Think of something, find suffering. There'll be a little article under S for suffering.
Wow.
Prayer, little faith, all those different things.
Very cool.
And he pushes buttons, but in a good way.
Yeah. All right, everyone. We will catch you next week. Bye.